Lately, it seems like everyone I talk to and so many people that I see are investing in properties for Airbnb. I mean, honestly, it's kind of crazy how many people that I hear of or see that are doing this, even people that I personally never would have suspected to be the real estate investment type of person. It's just kind of gotten to the point where it seems like it's the thing to do. Like, if you have yet to invest in real estate, this is the next obvious step. And I mean, that's kind of gotten to the point where I've started to feel left out, feeling like I'm kind of lagging behind in this investment race, which probably isn't the best way to look at it, but I know I'm not the only one who's felt that way. I don't currently own a short-term rental investment property, and I do like the idea of it. I hope to have an Airbnb or multiple of them someday. But today we're actually going to discuss some data that seems to say that maybe there have been too many people joining the whole short-term rental craze. So let's check that out. Because Airbnb is a public company, they publish a lot of data about their operations, and it just so happens that their data backs up my anecdotal suspicion that there have been a ton of people joining on as Airbnb hosts. In fact, in January of 2022 alone, this year, 58,000 new rental listings were added in on Airbnb in the US. And now, as of today, there's over 1.5 million Airbnb rental listings in the US. So there's a huge inventory of supply of Airbnb rental listings, and that supply seems to be growing at an ever increasing pace. And speaking of supply, I would absolutely love it if you could help out my channel's supply of likes and subscribers by hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Okay, so Airbnb inventory is increasing. That's totally fine, but inventory is only one side of the equation, which begs the question, what's happening with the demand side of things? Well, that's where things get interesting and also a bit troubling for Airbnb owners. Recently, over the first half of this year, 2022, there have been many Airbnb owners who have been reporting that they are making a lot less income on their short-term rental properties this year than they were bringing in last year in 2021. The data does show that total occupancy for US Airbnb listings is down. Now, Airbnb claims that demand has not dropped, but it's just that because there is more supply, that demand that is there is now spread out over more supply. So basically there's a lot more competition, which means current Airbnb owners aren't going to be seeing the same results that they saw in previous years when there was less competition that they had to deal with. We are going to talk about the implications of this data very soon, but first I want to pose a question, and that question is, why hasn't the demand increased alongside with the supply that has been ever increasing? There's quite a few answers that I think can be proposed to a question like this. One of the most obvious, in my opinion, is that it's just short-term rental ownership has been glamorized in our society to a point where it has increased inventory at a pace that the demand just organically can't keep up with. But beyond that, there's another answer that I personally think is a contributing factor, and that is that we are now 2 years past the start of COVID, and many people who were spending the last couple years taking their vacations here in the States are now feeling safe traveling abroad. So there's more people going out of country than have in the past 2 years, and that now adds even more competition for the US Airbnb rental listings. So to summarize, we have a lot more supply, but we don't necessarily have a correlating increase in demand. And so what do Airbnb owners do when they start seeing less bookings on their property? Well, they tend to lower their prices, and that's why I personally think that we're going to start seeing some downward price pressure on short-term rental listings. I often get asked about real estate pricing. For those of you who don't know, I have a career as a real estate agent as well. And I always tell people when it comes to real estate pricing, it's really pretty simple. It's all about supply and demand, just like any other market. There are only so many levers a property owner can pull in order to try to influence customers to rent their listing versus other listings. And to be honest, price is the most obvious and probably powerful and potent of those tools. A property owner who is seeing a lot less income coming in and a lot less bookings is probably going to try lowering their price in order to draw in more customers and get a bigger share of the market, get more of those bookings dedicated to their particular listing. It'll be interesting to see what this does to the short-term rental market over the long term. We got to remember that because short-term rental investment properties are typically all about cash flow for the owners of those homes. If this trend continues, we might see people dropping their listings and selling their Airbnbs or using those properties for other purposes. Because for most people, it only makes sense to hold on to it and keep it as an Airbnb if there's a positive cash flow supporting that investment. Ultimately, an equilibrium will be found in the market, this balance between supply and demand, but there seems to be an imbalance right now, and you better believe that there's going to be some consequences to that imbalance. And I think one of the main consequences will be the pricing that people can get away with charging for a short-term rental property. All right, so just take a moment and recall that at the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I'm still a fan of Airbnbs. I'm not doing this video to bash on short-term rentals. I'm just saying that because of the data, the facts that we're currently faced with, the market's changing, and I think that's going to change the financials on which properties make sense to buy at current prices for short-term rentals. A lot of properties that may have seemed to make sense before for an Airbnb may not make sense anymore based off of what it currently costs to purchase and what it would bring in revenue. I also think that this has huge implications for current Airbnb owners because many of them are going to start to feel the pinch of this change in supply and demand in this current market. So what to do about this? Well, if you currently own an Airbnb, I recommend you prepare for a potential drop in demand and bookings and thus income from your property if you haven't already seen that like many have. You need to do what you can to make your property stand out. Yeah, you may consider dropping the price of booking your Airbnb, but you could also consider trying to add more value to your booking to justify that pricing. And that could be done through adding in extra amenities or possibly even creating deals with local businesses where people who stay at your property get special discounts or packages available to them simply for staying at your particular listing. And if the market changes drastically and you find yourself with a negative cash flow situation on your investment property, and you don't feel like that's going to change in the near future, don't be afraid to sell that property. It's really easy to get too emotional about an investment real estate property, and I think that's because we typically hold houses and vacation spots as special places in our lives. But, as an investment property, this first and foremost needs to have positive cash flow. The numbers need to work. You can always buy another property down the road if this one that you currently have or the ones that you currently have doesn't work out. It will be the creative, diligent, and financially prudent Airbnb hosts who end up making it through this ever-changing market. All right, so if you found this data interesting, you're going to want to subscribe so that you don't miss my upcoming Airbnb-focused videos. On this channel, I focus on everything related to starting small businesses, as well as personal finance and real estate. I do appreciate you watching this video to the end, and I will see you very soon with some more juicy content.